Do you really believe you can fool my sister and get away with it? You had best put this right. I once came into a weak-looking, extremely gorgeous high school girl in the park. When taking her to the hospital, I made the decision to care for her in my house when she stated she had nowhere else to go. But shortly after, a black, high-end automobile pulled up in front of my apartment, and someone started tapping the intercom many times. I was terrified as I cautiously opened the door and saw a gruff-looking man with obvious criminal links standing there. He yelled, "I want the girl back," as his forehead veins swelled. I was brought to a mansion with little or no option. My name is Richard. My passion for books led me to pursue a career in librarianship. To be honest, it doesn't pay much, but I get great satisfaction from spending every day among my favorite books. On a day off, a uniformed high school girl happened to walk into the library one morning. I couldn't help but stare at her due to her remarkably attractive features and glossy black hair. It was like seeing a scene from a movie as she read. I kept looking at her while I arranged the shelves, and I even misplaced a few books. She read all day until it was time to close. I made a commitment to improve the following day after considering my errors from the previous day. Yesterday was really messy for me. She shouldn't be here today because it's Monday, and I have to concentrate. However, I was shocked to see her return soon after the library opened. She was dressed in her uniform. Asterisk there might be a brief closure of the school asterisk. She stayed till closing time once more, and the following day and the day after that, nothing changed. For 5 days in a row, she was at the library all day. My coworkers were whispering to each other by then. She comes in every day. What is the situation at her school? October is a month without any significant holidays. Her constant attendance at the library gave the impression that she had a purpose for being there. Inquisitive, I made the decision to speak with her. "Hey, you must be a high school student. Are you enrolled in Stern High School?" With a terrified expression, she got up and hurried out. She was moving too quickly for me to keep up with, so I lost sight of her. She never went back to the library after that day. I couldn't help but worry about her well-being. Since I didn't know her name or how to get in touch with her, there was nothing I could do. All I could do was pray she was okay. 3 days later, I had to take a detour because of road construction on my way home from work. In the park, I noticed a uniformed girl seated on a bench. Asterisk, that's the girl from high school asterisk. "Hey, you're the girl from the other day, right?" I hurried over to greet her. She replied, "No, don't look at me," as she quickly covered her face with her hands in shock. Her outfit was a touch soiled, and her hair was a little messy. I questioned, concerned, "What's your name?" Her name was Emily, she nervously replied. "Have you spent the night here? How are your folks doing?" She clung to my arm, pleading with me for assistance. "Please don't contact my parents or the school." Emily looked quite pale, which made me worry even more. October has seen a lot of pleasant days lately, but chilly snaps could strike at any time. Furthermore, it is evident that a high school girl napping in her uniform in a park is extremely risky. I nodded silently and chose to listen to her story, because I knew that if I reprimanded her now, she would probably simply turn and run from me again. "All right, I get it. Please just relax." Emily released my arm in relief, but passed out on the bench right away. "Emily, are you okay?" She didn't react when I repeatedly shouted her name and gave her a shake. I dialed an ambulance in a panic. Not too long after, the ambulance showed up. I paused for a second when the paramedic inquired about my connection with Emily. Emily appeared to have a good reason for not wanting anyone to get in touch with her parents or school. However, if I claimed to be a stranger, they might look into it and get in touch with her family anyhow. I lied and said I was her brother, and after a moment of hesitation, I went with her to the hospital. Emily, fortunately, wasn't really sick. She hadn't eaten in 3 days, which led to anemia and dizziness, according to Dr. Smith. To allay Dr. Smith's suspicions, I disclosed to him that my sister had recently been dieting. I remained at her side till she healed because I couldn't just walk away from her. She was feeling much better after receiving IV fluids throughout the night, and she thanked me gratefully. I apologize for the inconvenience. I appreciate you covering the expenses and lying to the hospital staff. I will undoubtedly repay you. What are you going to do now? Don't worry about the money. Will you be spending the night in the park once more? She looked down and remained silent when I inquired out of concern. I let out a long sigh. Is going back to your family still not an option? No. I see. How about spending the time here at my house? What? Oh, it's not like that. I hastily added after realizing how that sounded. You can never again sleep in the park, in my opinion. I explained, a little uncomfortable, and Emily laughed softly. I recognize. Then, I'll accept your offer, she grinned and nodded. We returned to my apartment, where I prepared a basic lunch and allowed her take a shower. Even though dinner was merely a stir-fry of chicken and veggies, Emily seemed delighted and ate a lot. It was really tasty. I haven't eaten a warm supper in a long time. As a thank you, I'll cook tomorrow. Are you a cook? That seems exciting to me then. She smiled shyly. Well, don't expect anything fancy. I got her some basic requirements because she would be staying for a while, but she insisted on wearing my clothes rather than new ones. She said, sporting one of my baggy shirts, I feel bad about you buying clothes for me, which somewhat elevated my heart rate. My previously boring life was unexpectedly made happier by living with Emily. She always greeted me with a smile in the morning. Good morning. After our breakfast together, she would send me on my way to work. I hope you have a pleasant day. And she would say, welcome back to me when I got home. In the evenings, we would talk and watch TV. We slept in different rooms, but we didn't share a bed. With her present, these ordinary times became incredibly delightful. Has my smile always been this big? I used to have a really stern countenance because I was often buried in literature. However, I've noticed that I smile constantly these days. Even I was surprised when I realized that I was humming while working or walking home. My coworkers frequently made fun of me for the change, asking, did something nice happen, Richard? These days, you seem so content. Have you found a girlfriend? It was around this time that I came to a crucial realization. I love her. I hope we can be together forever. She is still a high school student, though, and I am currently serving as her guardian. Taking everything into account, I found it difficult to admit my emotions. So, what do you think of me? Emily asked me one day, maybe weary of waiting. She crossed her arms. I paused, saying, well, Emily sulked and urged, please be explicit. Okay, I'll start now. I believe I've fallen in love with you, Richard. What? I was excited and elated by her unexpected confession. I'm grateful. I also enjoy you, Emily. She grinned broadly. So, you're going to stick around here? I'll drop out of school and get a job. But what she said made me return to earth. Although I also want to be with you. What about your parents? You're still underage. This cannot be kept a secret indefinitely. She gave a head shake. Not necessary. I live it. However, I grasped her hands and met her eyes directly. You don't have to tell me why you left your house. In fact, I don't know. But this cannot be how we continue to live. People won't understand that a high school student is living with a stranger, for whatever reason. Your parents may be concerned about you. At the very least, tell them your location. But she yelled, no, with conviction, and stopped me. Certainly not. You'll be hurt if we get in touch with them. I will suffer harm. For a split second, I thought that the fear might subside if something untoward happened. It's all right. I'll make amends with you. Be at ease about me." Emily hesitantly consented to phone her father after much convincing. "I'll come home tomorrow, and I'll bring the person I'm with." I was apprehensive about our future together, but I braced myself when I heard the loud ruckus on the other end of the line. 1 week to the day after I moved Emily in, a black, high-end automobile came up in front of my apartment building, and the intercom beeped loudly. I was terrified when I opened the door and saw a rugged-looking man who started threatening me. "Hey, give us the girl." Emily emerged behind me as I stopped, screaming, "Timothy, why are you in this place?" Timothy's face went white as he saw her in my huge sweater, and he reached for my collar. "How did you harm her? You had better be prepared to accept accountability." It was obvious he misinterpreted our relationship. Emily moved in to stop him in a flash. "Timothy, stop." It was he who gave me assistance. With an intense scowl, she asked, "Anyway, how did you know I was here?" Then Timothy, who a moment before had appeared so sure of himself, fell silent and began to stutter. "Well, it has to be Dad's fault," murmured Emily. "Okay, I'll take care of it." She changed back inside into her uniform and came out again. I carefully asked her, still perplexed, "Is your father?" Emily nodded, clearly understanding what I was asking. "He is, in fact, a gang boss. I didn't want to tell you because of this." I made a weird look and said, "Yeah, I figured." "You'll come with me to apologize, right?" Emily pressed me, nevertheless. I nodded after inhaling deeply. Ever since I had taken her in, I had known that this time would come. After putting on my best suit, I got into the waiting car and drove Emily to her family's house. Her father gave her a warm hug and started to cry as he said hello. "Emily, when you vanished, I was really concerned. I believed you to be abducted." I was taken aback by his surprisingly devoted behavior. Her father turned and gave me a pointed look, seeing my amazement. "My daughter told me you were living with her. You have to have meant to do that with some seriousness, right?" His expressions for his daughter and me were so different that I broke out in cold sweats from fear and anxiety as he pressed closer to me. But Emily's voice came up and her cheeks expanded. "Dad, this is the exact reason I detest you. How many more times will you destroy my relationships?" Later on, I found out that Emily's father would scare away any boys who dared to approach Emily by telling them, "You better be serious about my daughter." Unfazed, her father said gravely, "Of course. I refuse to give my beloved daughter to somebody who isn't prepared to provide her with a lifetime of happiness." Emily, though, was not giving up. "That implies that you cannot simply set up a marriage between me and a stranger. I'm not a means to increase your power." As it transpired, her father was attempting to arrange for her to meet the son of a different gang boss. Her father answered, his face stern, "People from ordinary backgrounds cannot comprehend our world. Did all the boys whom you were close to leave? Being with someone who shares our life is ideal for you." Emily bit her lip as she tried not to cry as she heard those words. I was calmly watching this discussion when I felt a wave of rage. I yelled violently at her father, forgetting the terror I had felt earlier. "Are you even a father? Kids are not possessions." After 3 days in the park, her malnutrition and dehydration almost killed her. How come you're unable to see her seriousness? Sleeping in the park for 3 days. Emily heard her father ask her, "Emily, why didn't you call?" as his face went pale. Emily answered, "I wanted you to see how serious I am," giving him a direct look. "My happiness is what I choose. I refuse to wed the person you selected for me." Her following remarks completely stunned me, even though I was charmed by her bravery. Her words, "I'm going to marry him," were directed at me. "What?" I unintentionally blurted out. Timothy, who had been listening quietly next to us, gave me a fierce scowl and spoke the words, "I knew it." In a hurry, I answered. No, no. I took no action. She is still underage. Timothy's expression, though, did not change. Her father, meantime, remarked, I'm glad to hear that. I want you to cease seeing my daughter, but I'll pay you for having her stay with you for a week. He tried to hand me a bundle of cash that he had taken out of his wallet. I shook my head, though, and said no. I don't need these things, but I can't do nothing now that I'm aware of the circumstances. I can't allow her return to this house if you're going to keep her bound. I'll make her happy, I resolutely said. With teary eyes, Emily turned to face me and murmured, Richard. Her father chuckled and remarked, Well, you've got guts, upon witnessing this. Take Emily with you if you're willing to assume responsibility for her life. I'll give you custody of my daughter. Emily received the ultimatum from her father. Go ahead and be with him if that's what you truly desire. But we're going to break our family ties. You'll never be permitted to go back. Listening close by, Timothy stepped in with a swift boss. You don't have to go that far. However, her father put an end to him by saying, She'll be happier living a normal life. Emily and I bowed in appreciation. Thank you, but if you could, please come to our wedding. You should be there for her on her special day since you are her father. Her father answered, appearing to soften a little, Okay. Timothy was told to turn the car around. I swear to be her father until I see her in her wedding dress, he said. Emily's father turned away from her with a brief, I'm not seeing you off, but Emily still seemed a little reluctant. Before going back inside the home, he said, Go now. I briefly saw the sadness in her father's face and felt a slight pang of guilt, but I still got in the car. Timothy issued me a severe warning as he drove us back to the flat. Remember, no touching her before the wedding. Got it? I recognize. I swear. Emily and I made a commitment that she would complete high school, and I remained her guardian until that time. I told my folks about our engagement and introduced her to them around that time. They were taken aback to learn that my fiancée was a high school student and the daughter of a gang leader, but they respected our resolve to stand by and love one another, and they even granted us their blessing. At last, Emily's high school graduation day came. We had a tiny wedding with just immediate relatives at a little chapel on the outskirts of town immediately following the ceremony. Emily's father showed up for the wedding as promised, escorting her down the aisle and giving her to me. This concludes our conversation. Before he left the chapel, he remarked, Take care. He climbed into his black automobile and drove off, despite our hasty pursuit. We lost communication with him after that. Eventually, his old house was cleared. We later found out that he had disbanded the gang he had inherited since the group was disintegrating. He had moved on to pursue a new life somewhere. Sometimes Emily would cry when she thought of her father, but she would also bravely grin and say, We shouldn't get in the way of his decision. I will shortly become a mother. We were expecting a child a few years after we got married. I whispered to Emily as I patted her belly softly, Let's get a detective to find your father after our baby is born. He was an obstinate man, but even he would have wanted to see his grandchild. Emily put her palm over mine and grinned slightly, saying, You really are brave. But I'm glad I chose to be with you. I carried on with my employment as a librarian in the interim. Shortly after our baby was born, I was working at the library as normal when someone I didn't expect to see came in. It was Emily's father, which astounded me. With an earnest attitude, he took a seat and began to read a book. As soon as I saw the book's title, I realized what was going on. Sir, it's you, isn't it? I yelled as I chased after him as he attempted to leave at closing time. Startled, he spun around and attempted to get away. Holding his wrist, I urged, Please don't run away like your daughter did. He gave up and stopped. This concludes my shift. Would you please come see Emily? Our son was born recently. Though emotion flashed in his eyes, he answered, No, I'm too busy. Are you not at liberty? You're not working right now, are you? Pointing to the book he was holding, I remarked. It was a book about job hunting, and it was a weekday. It was evident that he was unemployed at the moment. Then he begged, please keep Emily in the dark. Due to his age and gang history, he had attempted to obtain a new work but had encountered difficulties. He looked hurt and stated, I don't want Emily to know about this pathetic situation. With all due respect, I believe you've improved greatly since last time, I replied. More human, perhaps. Back then, you were extremely menacing. He shot back, what did you say? With anger. However, I grinned and went on. Emily is eager to see you. She'll accept you for who you are right now. He reluctantly consented to accompany me home. Emily seemed truly astonished when we arrived. She hugged her father and started crying right away. Dad, where have you been all this time? As he gave his daughter a hug, her father started crying too. We all moved in together after that. He continued to look for jobs while taking care of his grandchild and helping with cleaning. I practiced interviews with him and assisted him with his resume, but I couldn't help but criticize him all the while. This resume has handwriting that is too sloppy. While writing flawlessly is not required, try to make it readable. It's important that you grin more warmly during the interview rather than eerily. Your voice is too frightening. Try talking more softly. I understood why he had had trouble getting a job. Both his interview style and resume needed work. He finally was hired by a company because of the counsel I gave him. He now spends his days obeying orders from superiors, which is different from before, but he enjoys his work. Working with others brings me such fulfillment, he remarked one evening after finishing his shift. With a kind smile, Emily remarked, I'm happy that you finally turned into a great person, Dad. You can now gladly serve as the grandfather of my child.